just a few words about who I am and where I'm joining from. And then I'll invite us into just a moment of some silence and some grounding before I introduce our um, colleagues who are joining us and also the themes that we'll be exploring together. So, welcome again, everyone. It is a absolute joy to be with all of you in this space and with those of you who will be listening to this recording after it's completed. My name is Kathryn McElveen, and I serve as the Executive Director at the Center for Courage and Renewal. I'm so glad that you have chosen to be with us today for a conversation that feels really deeply needed in this moment of our shared life. Again, if you're just joining us, if you'd like to put in the chat where you're joining us from, I'm joining this conversation from my home in what is now known as Travelers Rest, South Carolina. My community was built on ancestral hunting grounds of the Cherokee people and is in the ecosystem that is now known as the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'm a native of North Carolina and have spent most of my life in the southeastern US, but I'm also a descendant of people who immigrated to this country from Western Europe. So I know you're all joining from your places and times, and I want to give all of us just an intentional moment to really arrive and be grounded in this place. And so I'm going to invite us in to just a moment of silence. As we share this silence together, you may want to look out a window and remember where you are located. You may want to pay attention to your body and how you're either standing or situated in a chair or otherwise. You may want to bring your attention to your breath, whatever it is that makes you feel grounded as we enter into this space. We'll hold a moment of silence together in order to more fully invite our presence. Thank you. We are meeting at a time when many people are sensing a profound shift in the world around us, whether that's socially, politically, ecologically, spiritually. And many of us are feeling suspended between what has been and what is not yet fully formed. It's an in between that can feel disorienting, chaotic, and is also a time that is alive with possibility. Norma Wong names these moments as critical junctures, points in history or our personal lives when the old patterns no longer hold and the choices that we make carry extraordinary power. Parker Palmer has also long reminded us that threshold moments like this are uncomfortable, but also places where imagination awakens and where we remember our deepest commitments. And so today, as we're gathering, we're asking some important questions. What does this in between moment ask of us? What does it mean to step in rather than to step away? How might we co-create new realities that better serve us, each other, and the planet we share? And we are profoundly fortunate to be guided by two teachers who have spent their lives cultivating courage and clarity and community in times of uncertainty. Parker Palmer is the founder of the Center for Courage and Renewal, and he's also the author of many beloved works, including Let Your Life Speak, On the Brink of Everything, Healing the Heart of Democracy. His writing and teaching have shaped thousands of leaders and communities around the world, and he continues to be a sought-after mentor, teacher, and conversation partner for people from all walks of life and all places of the world. Norma Wong is a Zen master. She's also the former Hawaii state senator, whose work has included more than 30 years in electoral politics. She's the author of When No Thing Works, a Zen and Indigenous perspective on resilience, shared purpose, and leadership in the Timeplace of Collapse, and the author of a new forthcoming book, Who We Are Becoming Matters. She's also a longtime community advisor, an activist, and teacher of embodied leadership, has been very active in the applied space, and is a member of the Collective Acceleration Community of Practice. So I'm so grateful to both of you for being here today. And as we get started, I would just like to offer an opportunity for you to share anything else that you would like to say about where you find yourself in this moment. And I'd invite whichever of you would like to jump into that question first.
Parker,
Norma.
hi. We forgot to actually draw straws or enter into arm wrestling to decide the pole position.
I have the short straw right here.
Right. So please, uh, this is your house, this is your home. So please, where are you? How are you coming in? And what brings you here?
Thank you, Norma, and thank you, Kathryn, and thanks to everybody who's here and helped make this possible. Number one, I'm just delighted to be with you, Norma. This is a wonderful opportunity for me to listen and learn, and I'm eager to do more of that. Um, as for how I am at this very moment, I've often said that I was born baffled, and that has been with me for 86 years. It's not likely to go away anytime soon. These are baffling times. And I love the way you open up our bafflement to no simple answers, but more bafflement because there's so much fruit in those fields. And I think for me, at age 86, it's not only the in-between time of the world, um, as Kathryn was saying earlier. It's also an in-between time in my own human journey, experiencing the limitations of aging and yet wanting to continue to lean into um, uh, my membership in the human community and in the natural community as fully as I possibly can. So lots of questions, lots of probes. As Gandhi said, lots of experiments with truth. That's where I am right now.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation to be there. I hadn't realized, when you look in terms of the how it is that you might finally meet someone. I am at this year 69 years old, and I remember meeting you through your writing many, many years ago. As I shared a few minutes ago when we were preparing for this call with everyone, my teacher actually brought your writing into the space of this, all of us who are practicing, serious Zen students, a little righteous about how it is that we trained. And he essentially said, Parker Palmer says, you cannot be a leader unless you do internal work. And I would say to you, after you read this piece, Leading from Within, don't be a stone Buddha doing internal work and not leading in the world, right? And so that was my introduction to who it is that you are. And I want to thank you for bringing both of those together.
Thank you.
Well, I will add that I met both of you also through your books, both of which arrived at the exact moment and time when I needed them. Um, I've had the privilege and deep pleasure now for many years of knowing Parker and being as both a mentor and a colleague and a friend. But my relationship, Norma, with you is just beginning. But likewise, it started when your most recent book leapt off the shelf at me right at the moment when I needed it. And so I am trusting as we gather in this place that this conversation is happening right at the moment in which it is needed. Before we jump in, I also want to say a bit of welcome to all of the people who are in this space with us. Some of them are my colleagues at the Center for Courage and Renewal, and they're doing the magic behind the scenes to make it possible for the three of us to see one another on the screen. And they're going to be helping to hold this container that we are creating, but also helping to hold this container are all of the people who are joining us in this moment. And I want to just say a deep word of gratitude to each of those folks, both for the gift of their presence and also for the gift of their donation to the Center for Courage and Renewal and in support of our mission. Um, just to give everybody a little bit of orientation around our time together, we're going to spend the first part of it in conversation that I'll help facilitate, um, Parker and Norma, between the two of you. We're going to have an opportunity for people to submit questions. We've already had a few of those come in, and then there will be an opportunity later for people to submit questions in the chat, and I'll do my very best job asking you as many of those as I can. We're also going to have some time towards the end to learn about some ways that we can continue this conversation, continue deepening, exploring these themes for those folks who would like that opportunity. And then we'll have an opportunity just for some kind of closing remarks at the end. I do want to let everyone know that there will be moments when the chat is disabled. And that really is to allow those of us who are facilitating and in conversation to be as present to this dialogue as we can be, but the chat will be opened up at times when people are invited to share questions and comments and reflections, those sorts of things. So, having gotten ourselves a little oriented, I'd like to invite Parker and Norma, each of you to just briefly reflect a little bit around a kind of grounding question. And that really is, how does this moment in history feel from where you stand? What does this moment in history feel like from where you stand? And Norma, I'd invite you to actually offer the first reflections on that if you'd be so kind.
So it would be impossible to meet this moment in a way in which you'd say uh, it's just a acceleration of things that have occurred in the past. Because if we were just on a treadmill, then we'd say, well, we've been at this point in other places, even in my short life of 69 years, where things have felt that they have sped up. But here it feels like it's both speeding up and falling apart at the same time. And one cannot tell whether it's speeding up because it's falling apart or whether it's falling apart because it's speeding up. So there's certainly correlation, but not necessarily causation, which is to say that it feels that we are at a culmination point, where everything that humanity has built has reached its outer limits of being able to hold on to things without letting some things go.
Mm.
And then a letting go does not mean that you can just continue with that which you have built already, and that we may very well be at a place where recreation is required. So, from a Zen perspective, right, that may be a threshold that individuals may meet that would be useful for our own internal work and for transformation to occur. It would be rare for a critical mass of humanity to reach this possibility at the same time.
Mm.
And in that regard, right, it is a moment that while we meet each day with some horror, it also is a time of unprecedented possibility. If we choose to step into it.
Thank you.
Well,
Parker.
I think for me, I mean, part of me just wants to say what she said, and then move quickly on. But within the context that Norma just so eloquently described, revealingly described, I think, I'm grateful for an experience I had through the Center for Courage and Renewal 10 or 15 years ago when I was wrestling with vocational questions that had to do with vocation and aging. I went into the Clearness Committee with two questions. What do I want to let go of, and what do I want to hang on to? And by the end of that Clearness Committee, through that amazing process of open, honest questioning that peels back layers of obstruction and confusion and bafflement, I ended up with a different second question. I was
Mm.
still asking, what do I want to let go of? Because there's a lot to let go of as life moves along. And to do that gracefully, to do that intentionally, to do that willingly and understandingly seems important to me. But instead of asking the question, what do I want to hang on to? I was now asking, what do I want to give myself to? What do I want to give myself to? Which is a question based in abundance, unlike what do I want to hang on to, which is a question based in scarcity, in the sense that if I don't hang on to it, I won't have anything left. These days, the question of what I want to give myself to has real priority for me. And not just in the sense of how do I want to conserve my shrinking bandwidth as an aging person, but in the sense of where is the human possibility here? And for me, it is very much in recreation, rebirth, renewal. For a long time, the image of weaving, weaving and reweaving a life and a community has been an important image for me. It it's an ecological image, I think, because nature is the master weaver, and I want to know how I can collaborate not only with the master weaver but with all of us apprentice weavers who are trying to reweave a tattered fabric into new forms more full of love, truth, and justice, not knowing what that might even look like or what that might even mean, except for visions of possibility that we have that I want to invest myself in and trust and help bring into being.
Thank you. You know, you both spoke to this kind of reality in this moment, um, of the power of choice and also the discernment around, the choices that we make. And I wonder if you could say a bit either about your own experience or communities that you've learned from. I feel like this question of, you know, how we discern what's worth holding on to, how we discern what's worth giving ourselves to, is a really central question, especially in a space where the volume of options is just overwhelming. Um, so I wonder if there's any wisdom, either from your own life experience or from experiences that you have learned, you know, through your own um, time as a you know citizen, learner, student, human, that you would just offer for other people who might be holding some of those same questions.
Well, uh, I would say the American experience of abundance and lives in a binary with scarcity, and that a and then what both of those do is it prevents people from actually making choices,
Mhm.
right? And you actually cannot do anything justice if you're trying to hold on to everything. Right? That's just a it's just a thing. I've been in relationship to a number of endeavors where what success looks like is you get bigger, right? And that 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 growth has a tendency to reach a place where it spawns other types of issues that don't rear their head, with the if you weren't so large, right? And but you want to continue to be successful, and so you just keep on growing. And in in that growth, there's a part, the things that you give up could be conscious or unconscious. And I'd say if you're going to give up things, give them up consciously, rather than just having it whittle away
Mhm.
as a matter of accumulation. I speak that I am Native Hawaiian and Hakka Chinese, and the Hakka Chinese ancestors were in this place called Hawaii, more than 5 generations ago for me. And so, they were here since the 1870s, actually, right? A long time ago. And they continued to have like a more of an immigrant notion about things, including the necessity to save all things. But truly, there are only so many empty tofu containers that will be useful in your life. I'm just saying, right? And then there is the part where your grandmother has passed, and if you find yourself in the cupboard, actually making a decision about how many of those tofu containers you're going to continue to keep of hers, you're in trouble.
Mhm.
Okay, you're just in trouble. And this lighthearted example to me is just emblematic of the choices we do not make, right? The choices we do not make. The choice to make about what it is we will not only begin, but what we will complete,
Mhm.
what we have to set aside so that we can complete it, right? My teacher actually taught me like the guiding rule of the hand. Okay, So he said, hold up your hand. How many digits do you have? And in the groups that I have been in, only in one case has someone showed up with 6 fingers. Okay. And so I said, okay, you can have 6. But everyone else, essentially, it's if you ask the question, what can you handle? The root word of handle is hand. And if you hold up your hand, you only have 5 digits. So, very simply, without getting metaphysical, you can handle only 5 things at any given time. And of the 5, only 3 can you go deeply in terms of on a critical basis. And of the 3, only one of those will you be able to even say you are approaching mastery. If that one continues to be the one for long periods of disciplined practice, and it doesn't just trade out every time you change the 5. Okay? And that's not 5 plus 3 plus 1. That's of the 5, there are 3, and of the 3, there is 1. And now you choose. And now what I find is, although this guiding rule is simple, right, the human mind and the human ambition and the human notion of scarcity and that whole notion of, well, I will be okay if I can have many things, just has to continuously be interrupted to make the choice. And so therefore, choose that which your energy and your desire and your love really centers itself. And then, make that choice based on how you would protect the possibility of that love by not crowding it over with many things. So that for me, it also like comes into the notion of why we were struggling on a governance basis. We have simply overloaded and outsourced the needs of the commons into centralized systems. And we've outsourced them rather than holding them as common endeavors. And we did that for reasons of efficiency and the reasons for modernity and the reasons because in many ways it's easier. And we now have these structures of governance overloaded, right? And overstretched, too many things and not enough digits, and easy to stray beyond purposeful paths if you never set something aside. Right? Now, how to get back to purpose is not by essentially just collapsing everything, but in some ways, the two aspects of collapse that are upon us are just converging, and that's why it feels so horrific, right? The collapse that we are undertaking by our own hand, where we're destroying things, and then the collapse that was occurring because everything had reached its limit, and it's converging. And in the converging, it's important to understand what parts of it are by our own hand and what parts of it will be, even if there is a regime shift, it does not mean that the structures that are there, that are here, are going to be able to continue as we would wish.
Mm-hmm. There's so much, Norma, in what you just said. Parker, I wonder what Norma's comments are bringing up for you.
Oh, so many things, as you just suggested, Kathryn. I mean, one is that I know somebody who really needs to save boxes because you never know when you might need a box. and I hope she's listening right now. I believe she is. I'm also very struck by your comment about outsourcing, Norma. And I instantly thought of how outsourcing also removes us from a sense of personal relationship and responsibility. Not only that it overloads us, but it distances us from what we're doing in the world. So that this country, as you well know, outsources the fighting of wars to what are essentially troops of mercenaries. And we lose the moral dimension of war more and more every time we do that. What I believe, I don't think is inconsistent or incongruent with what Norma just said about leadership. I think a great task of leadership at every level, and this could be the parent in a family, the neighbor in a community, a fellow parishioner, or member of one's spiritual community. I think it's to help each other get back to what the most fundamental tropisms of the human heart are. I experience human beings as like plants, drawn towards certain things like sun and rain and nourishment, and repelled by other conditions under which they don't truly grow. And one of the great confusions of modern life is why are we drawn towards things that are death dealing and repelled by things that are life giving? But I think when leaders help people get back in touch with the true tropisms of the heart, the soul, however you want to say it, um, good things begin to happen among in the human ecosystem as happened in the natural ecosystem without that kind of encouragement. You can discourage an ecosystem, but if you just let it be, it will follow its own path of encouragement. And I want to go quickly back to something I learned early on when I became a community organizer at age 30 and moved to Washington, D.C., where I was working in a neighborhood that was subject to blockbusting and redlining and white flight and all of the things that destroy community. The dominant theory of organizing at that time was Saul Alinsky's theory, which was very confrontational, very adversarial. The idea was to out people and embarrass people and to press people to the wall and get them into a corner in order to get what you wanted. And I just instinctively thought, even though I didn't have formal experience as an organizer, that what people really wanted was to live at peace and in harmony with neighbors who were good to each other. And the community in which I was working was one which had been built by white flight from an earlier situation and was now threatened with white flight again. We went around basically asking people in a whole variety of forums and venues, what's your vision of possibility for the way you would like to be living? We're all starting to understand that there's no place to run to, we being white people who were running from people of color. So the only sensible option is to imagine a future in which the richness of diversity can be experienced. And rather than doing strategic planning, we started putting on events which allowed people to have that experience with their new neighbors, with the folks who were moving into the community, causing waves of white fear. Art fairs, culture fairs, food fairs, living room gatherings around topics of mutual interest. We worked with religious communities and civic organizations to bring these themes of living into the life we wanted to see, the sun that we were drawn towards, the tropism of our own hearts and souls. And to this day, there's evidence that those efforts made a difference. And so part of my wondering about what to give myself to rather than what to try to hold on to, which is not a viable question at all anymore for me, is what's the equivalent of that in current times? And I love the stories you tell in your book, Norma, about people who had a vision of tropism that folks in the audience then rose to, saying, yes, that's who we are, that's what we want, and could feel the energy of the sun shining on that particular dimension of growth in a deeply, I think, organic way.
I'd love to pick up this thread around vision and Norma, one of the things that you really challenge us to do is to lift our eyes to the horizon. And I think we all agree that if we ever want to get anywhere, we have to know some things, and we have to know where we are, and the other piece we have to know is where we want to go. And in this time where we have a lot of energy going to, kind of describing the moment that we're in, one of the things that I really felt drawn to in your book was the pull to that horizon, and not just the near horizon, but the far horizon, multiple generations, beyond the kind of near horizon that many of us, think we have kind of some sense of. And I would love to just dive a little bit deeper into the importance of that storytelling. And Parker, similarly, you talk about the tragic gap, that difference, the space between, the world we know is possible and the harsh realities that we live in. And one of the things that you name is, in order to stay in that gap without turning towards cynicism, which is corrosive, or idealism of the irrelevant sort, is that we have to be able to stand and act in that space. But part of being able to stay in that space is having a tangible sense of the world we know is possible. And so I would just love to throw that out there and give each of you just a chance to be in conversation about that. Norma, I would I would really love if you could just kind of ground everyone on the call a little bit in this the sense of the difference between the near horizon and the far horizon, and why it's so important to really get specific in our storytelling about the place that we're trying to go. Norma, your microphone is currently muted.
There we
There
go.
you go. Yeah, thank you.
Um, so it's early morning here. Not that early. It's 9:10 on my laptop here. We have some folks from Hawaii on this call, but most of you are in places that are farther along in the day. Right? You have a jump on me, and I have the luxury of having more time than you for the day. Right? As it turns out, the world actually needs both to be in play at the same time. Right? We need to have people who are tending to the now, and people who are tending to that time place that once the people who are in the now put up their head, they know what to do next. In fact, people in the now who are only in the now have a tendency to only be able to replicate the now. That tends to be the habit pattern that we have. And it is a useful habit pattern because things can fall apart if they're not tended to. And so we count on many people to, a fairly large percentage of any community, we count on people to get up and to really have an understanding that today I'm going to do the same thing I did yesterday. And I'm going to do it well, and I love it, and, or I don't love it, but somebody's paying me good for it. But we count on them to think of that as their thing that they're doing. And that is not even the near horizon. So the near horizon for people who are in the now, I guess can be summed up in the two words, what's next? Okay, what's next is the near horizon. And that will be dependent on role and even culture. If you're talking about like what's next or age, okay? So a 5-year-old will have a constant notion of, well, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next? And will constantly be in that particular mode. And any parent in the realm of a 5-year-old will long for the 5-year-old only to be engrossed in whatever is happening right now rather than in what's next. Okay. But the inquiry about what's next is an important human development attribute that we may or may not gain skill in. Okay. And so what happens is if we don't gain skill in it, if we're not in a culture where, or in a learning place where you learned how to understand that, then you could go through periods of your life where you are in the transitional, liminal kind of dank space, where it's neither night nor day, where you're trying to figure that out. And in the meantime, you go about life as best as you can. Okay. But you haven't made that transition to whatever is next. Okay. Most people think about the horizon as being better at determining what's next. And I would say that's not the horizon at all. What the horizon is it's that place where your descendants live, the ones who are not yet born. And that the really big things that society and humanity and regions of the world need to figure out is actually takes much more than the 20 or 40 years that encompass that time space, right? When you say my descendants are not yet born. So now you're talking about the time space of descendants, 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 right? It's the 7 generations that Indigenous people speak of is not a metaphor. It is about a practice and aspirational space. And the practice is about honing the narrative and the strategies that are going to be required to get to that place. If you are in a place where there is very little water, you either need to travel to it or figure out how to get it to you. And no major technology around irrigation occurred in a single generation. Right? All irrigation, as it was thought about, took many generations to figure out and to build and to make ground and make way for, and then to integrate into whatever it is that you did. And when a people stopped thinking about how to get water is when they actually ended up being at risk, right? How do we look at how we're going to feed ourselves in the future? Right? We have outsourced, right, the human thinking into industry, or now not even industry that is populated with people. Right? If you're going to ask your chatbot how are you going to feed yourself, right, 100 years from now, the question is, will that chatbot have learned from enough human aspiration in the year 2025? Or do we not have enough human aspiration for the longer range questions, right? The longer issues the greater needs that we have. So it's like a horizon, literally on a physical basis, you cannot see unless you lift up your head, right? If you're looking at your device, you will not see the horizon. You will not even have a notion of what horizon is, right? That place where land meets the sky, or the land extends into water which meets the sky, can be seen by anyone at any age or any height, but only if you lift up your head. I could go on and on, Parker, so you have to help me out here and kind of take up the conversation.
Well, I wish you would go on because it's wonderful stuff that we don't hear often enough as clearly as you articulate it. So thank you for that. I want to pick up on two pieces. One came to me, Kathryn, when you asked the question originally, and I can't quite remember what that hook was, but I'll just say my thing. And that is, it 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 came to me many years ago that if I've ever experienced something among real live human beings, including myself, with all my and their limitations, if I've ever experienced something that is countercultural, and that's happened many, many times to me, that means that it's possible among all human beings, any human beings, at any time. Because it's a level of experience that's replicable, and once you've seen it, you can't deny its possibility. And so when I realized, oh, I have experienced some moments of true community where the abundance is not in the stuff we have, but in the quality of our relationships with one another, in our capacity to be present to each other's need and to provide resources that we didn't even know we had before we engaged each other at this level of heart, soul, body, mind. Um, that can happen again wherever human beings are. And the fact that our institutional patterns and designs and our cultural imprints work against that is not to be taken as an excuse for not going there time and time and time again. So there's a piece of coded experience, I think, for most of us that depends on memory to bring back those kinds of moments where the sun really was shining. And as Norma was saying earlier in our pre-session, the rain was falling and all the things were happening that allow plants to grow. Um, that's coded human experience that is replicable, and we don't want to lose that, even though the large percentage of our experience may move in the other direction. The other thing I want to say is an acknowledgement of my own humility in trying to get inside a different cultural tradition than my own when it comes to 15 generations forward or 15 generations back. I don't think I'm unusual among white middle class Americans, people like me, mainline, the kind of people, white, straight, male, especially, who, for whom this society was constructed for our well-being. I don't think I'm unusual in saying that I can reach back a couple of generations, but after that, it's all lost in the fog in terms of meaning for my life. I learned about generational thinking when I began working as a community organizer with Black colleagues who had the strongest sense of 13 generations of ancestors in this country, using whatever limited, severely limited degrees of freedom they had to do what was possible, reaching for all those generations going forward. I'm working with people in the 1970s in Washington, D.C., who very much feel that they stand on the shoulders of 13 generations of ancestors and therefore can see 13 generations ahead in terms of motive power for what they were doing. Um, I struggle with that as a person who is, as you see me here today, with the limitations that come with my cultural imprint. But I'm drawn in that direction. I'm trying to find my own ways of reaching legitimately for that without just mimicking someone else's cultural theme, without that kind of appropriation that doesn't actually resonate with my own integrity around this issue, with my own truth around this issue. May resonate with my integrity, but not with my known truth. So I want to put that forward as a point of creative tension for someone like me, with what Norma is saying, which I think is very, very important stuff. And on that, I'm a work in progress.
Thank you both. In just a minute, um, I'm going to have us turn to some questions from the audience. But before we do that, I want to raise another creative tension. Um, Norma, one of the things that jumped off the when your book jumped off the shelf, certain words jumped off the page, and just in the opening preface, you asked the question, what does it mean to believe and practice in a particular way and to know it is not enough for the purpose one is practicing? And I think that that really, that very simple targeted question speaks to a tension that I feel myself trying to hold. I hear in some of what each of you has already shared. I hear in our Courage and Renewal community this the the kind of practices that are a way of bringing in something into being and also knowing that they will never be all that is needed. Um, so I wonder if you could just reflect, each of you, on some of your practices right now. The practices that you are using to stay grounded in the midst of this time, practices that you're using to, um, Norma, you also talk about leaping and, practices that you're leaning into because they have the potential to help us leap uh, into new ways of being, practices that build trustworthy relationships, which are another theme that has come up in this conversation as just foundational to everything else that we want to do. So if you could just reflect, each of you, on what some of those practices are for you, and if there are tensions, coming up for you around them, how you're holding them.
So, I'm kind of an old school Zen practitioner. I see my friend actually, Ken Kushner, on this call, and we are in the old school category of things. Which is to say that a day in which you are not practicing your breath is a day that you're not connecting to the greatest possibility of who you are. And every day that you practice your breath, you learn something new about uh, the your your internal integrity, because it's like a it's like a reset that's even more powerful than rebooting your laptop, right? So, a laptop doesn't reboot itself. You actually have to press the button. And oh, by the way, if it's in a forced reset, that's the worst thing. So a time to practice your embodiment, which for us is meditation, and it's also posture, it's also releasing the tension, anything that may be unnecessary to hold our body structure. That these embodied practices are rebooting, that is, we do by choice, and we do by focusing on that, spending the time on it. And that aspect of it I find missing in most culture and complicated because people conflate embodied practices with faith or belief systems or all those types of things, right? Or they have so much, they're holding so much trauma that literally the notion that you would focus on your breath and where it's coming in your body becomes a traumatic moment, because the way that when there's really significant trauma, a survival mechanism is to separate yourself from your body, and in that way protect yourself from whatever may be harming you. Okay, and it is a false protection. It actually makes you more and more dependent over time on external people and entities and programs and whatnot to care for you. Okay. It is a slippery, really slippery slope, needed and required in the moment of trauma, but you cannot stay in your amygdala forever and be safe there. Okay, and so just coming back into the embodied self in whatever ways that the many, many, many hundreds of mechanisms that exist, except please don't try to use the app for the 15-minute reset, okay, or 15-second reset, okay? To me, that's outsourcing your embodiment, which would be a huge irony, right? So first and foremost, the embodiment, not as a metaphor, but as an actual practice. Never say to folks in the room, well, let's take a breath, and what you mean is take a few seconds to figure out things. Right? That's not useful. I think it's not useful to use breathing as an icebreaker, because then your mind connotes that with something other than just your own embodiment. Okay. Always really working on the practice of having clarity of why it is I'm doing anything. It's become very, very useful. And it's become useful in also my making decisions about things I'm not going to do anymore, because they're no longer tied to a purpose that I remember, or a purpose that is close to me, and may even be in now the category of not useful, but I am just in some kind of rote memory of continuing to do it. Right? So what is the purpose of this? Knowing the purpose before you go to the grocery store is very useful, unless you want to buy a lot of things that you're then going to have to throw away at the end of the week. Right? So even for dealing with scarcity and efficiency, purpose is very useful. I try to stay in the story, which is even more fundamental than in the narrative. Right? And to interrupt any ism that might enter my brain at any given moment. There's a so there is there is a story about like that would go back to like the beginning parts of Eastern spiritual thinking that have to do with the levels of consciousness. Okay, and they talk about that first level, the nen, the first nen, as being you just experience it and you have no name for it. Right? It's that first experience. The second, about the second is you describe it. Okay? Oh, it is cold, right? And then the third is you name it. You have a name for it. Okay. And then you go into like the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, right? Which is at some point you're talking about an experience that did not occur, that you did not have, but somebody told you about, and you're experiencing their experience. And so you're somewhere out there, right? Now we have conversations that are filled with not even that. What you're doing is you're describing a framework and an ism, okay, associated with a series of what were legitimate experiences, but you've now like just boiled it down to a framework. You're so far away from the actual experience or the story of the experience that now, unfortunately, you're into the solving of the ism. Okay, and in the solving of the ism, and I say this as someone whose first practice is actually strategy. Okay, is that you can't build a strategy around an ism. Okay, it is impossible to build a strategy to deal with an ism. Okay, because you're so far away from the actual experience that gave rise to the analysis of what is an ism, that you will never be able to satisfy or untie the knots that gave rise to that ism. Okay. So staying within the senses is about the story, right? It's in your what you see, you hear, you can smell, you can taste, you can feel on an actual tangible feeling versus feeling as a concept or a metaphor. Okay? And so that connection, that connectivity is a practice. Before you can even forge relationship, you actually have to have both internal and external connectivity to be open to that, allow it to occur, not as an onslaught, but as an experience that you have practiced to navigate, right? To be an interwoven relationship, Hawaiians call pilina, to be an interwoven relationship not only survives all things, but has an elasticity that will mean that you will always be more than the sum total of who it is that you are individually. Right? And so that becomes not only a part of you that builds more strength and skill, but it's a force field in a time in which isolation is a strategy.
Mhm.
And then I cook.
What time is dinner, Norma?
A few hours from now, but I will say that today I am thinking about making a red lentil curry.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be there. Well, Kathryn, I don't know where you are with time. I can be very brief about this, if you'd like. Your mic is off, so.
That'd be great, Parker. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to I want to say that part of what Norma just said so brilliantly reminded me of the advice that if you go to the grocery store and you're looking at the ingredients on a can or a package and you don't recognize them as names of food, do not buy them. Uh, I think it's very akin to that. So my quick list is listening, truth telling, silence, writing, walking in the woods, poetry, and thanks to my friend Sharon Salzberg, breathing. When she first told me I needed to learn to breathe, I thought that I had at least got that mastered, but it turned out that I hadn't, and so I'm grateful always for her guidance on that. But I'll lay it down there.
Thank you. Well, I do want to open up an opportunity for people to share questions. We do have one that I'll go ahead and get you started with that was sent in actually before this conversation, but feels really relevant to what we've been talking about today. So the question is, how can we who work in service or justice transformation also take good enough care of ourselves as we go along to not get shoved both suddenly and in slow motion into profound burnout? And so I just wonder what you might share about that reality that so many are facing, and any words of wisdom that you might have.
Well, most of us take better care of our car than we do of ourselves. And we would not think that it would be possible to go on a cross country trip if we hadn't checked the tires, put the fuel in, made sure that the engine is running well. Or in the case of an electric vehicle, that the battery wasn't on its last legs and so would therefore not hold a recharge. But we do that with ourselves all the time. And I think that this is part of not of being separated from ourselves, not living an embodied life. Right? And so if you lived an embodied life, then you would get up every day and a thing that would occur before you opened up your media feed is that you would register um, how your body is doing, and then you would actually do something about it. And you would do something about it because if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to do all the other things, which is a way I believe you need to think of as that part about care. If you do not do that, you cannot do what you want to do in the world. What you want to do in the world, you're not a machine. And even machines need to be cared for. And so you cannot do what you're doing in the world if you're overextended and you're of no use to people in a like a rundown state. And one of the worst things that can happen in a organization or movement is to have burned out people continuing to do the work because you are at a portion of your capacity. And when you're at a portion of your capacity, a thing that tends to go into full gear is your ego because it's protecting itself in terms of your relevancy and your agency. And it doesn't have a conversation with itself, or this is just my ego speaking.
Mm.
It just goes into full gear, right? And so in a rundown state, you are having to be cared for by the institution or organization without your agency in that care, right? And so you're in a like a triple threat situation, as far as I'm concerned. Other thing that's I think is not useful is when we 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 actually call people who have like done many things and have not cared for themselves, and we call them heroes, and we build fundraisers around them. And I think that that sends a unuseful message throughout our enterprise that what we're counting on is for people to see themselves as being expendable. Okay, to, for example, have a great civic life, but families that have fallen apart. For example, right? I think that it sends a poor example throughout the enterprise of work. So I think of self-care as not an indulgence, but a disciplined thing that you do all the time. You make sure that you don't fall into a dehydrated state. You tend to chronic things so that they do not become acute. You watch your spirit meter and make sure it hasn't gone into the red reserve area where there's nothing left. You bring your whole self, and your whole self is not a poor representation of what wholeness is. So,
Thank you.
If there's a moment, Kathryn, would you like me to respond also?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate what Norma just said about self-care. It came to me some time ago that self-care is never a selfish act. It's always being done on behalf of not only yourself, but other people whose lives you touch. And that was liberating for me. I do want to say a quick word about my own experience of burnout, and I don't know that this applies to everything that falls under that label. But at one time, I thought burnout was about trying to give too much, too fast, too often. It was a quantitative problem. And in my case, at least, I came to understand that burnout often has to do with trying to give something that I don't have to give, some idealistic representation of myself that isn't organically true for me, because I do believe that my natural gifts, the gifts that come to me as an organism in the great ecosystem of life, um, replenish themselves like fruit on a tree when they're given away, if the tree is given the proper conditions under which to grow. So for me, that's been a point of discernment about what is it that I'm really experiencing when I'm experiencing burnout. Maybe it's because I'm operating out of a false narrative or false story of who I am.
Thank you. I am watching our time, and in just a moment, I want to invite Nichelle Harrison, who's our Director of Membership and Belonging at the Center for Courage and Renewal, to talk just a little bit about a future opportunity that we have to continue these conversations. And so while Nichelle's getting ready to join us, I'll offer this question. And Norma and Parker, you may be able to see that there are some questions that have been submitted in the chat. One person noticed that our group here is mostly older in physical age and wondered what your thoughts might be on how best to reach children, grandchildren, whose relationship to the world seems very different now. And if you have just some brief thoughts around that, we'd love to hear them.
yeah. Well, so I know that there are people that are in this circle here, this huge circle of 272 people, and I think it went up to 292 at some point. that you have younger people in your lives. But there's a way in which we don't necessarily think of ourselves as fully in the connection points that we have. We somehow have a way in which, in the many relationships that we have, we include some in our conversation for these things and others in different kinds of conversations. Okay. And so in rooms, some of the Zoom rooms I'm in, you know, like on the screen would be both the adult and it would be a child who is listening in on the conversation as well.
Mhm.
And the in my community activism space, it is a common thing for there to be children in the room. And frequently more so children than younger adults who may not have an interest in being in that room, but there will be children in the room. Right? And at some point, there's that notion of younger adults being explicitly invited in, which is a thing that generations need to do with each other. They need to actually explicitly provide the invitation. And when you provide the invitation is for what, right? The
Mhm.
invitation actually is for sharing, right? And then the sharing may become apprenticeship. But apprenticeship cannot be a forced thing. No apprentice will learn anything if they're told that's what you have to do in order to earn your way at the table, right? And so apprenticeship is a thing that is useful if and is useful mostly on a relationship basis, right? Anything else. So I'm not so much into like a fixed. On occasion, I've been asked, will you be my coach? And I would say, I think we need to get to know each other first before I can do that, because it would be about the relationship that would allow for something more to grow, not for us to just have a job description. I am the student and you are the coach, kind of a thing, right? Other is that we should be careful about not consciously or unconsciously creating homo, homogen, homogenerational organizations. So when I go into spaces and they only have one generation of people there, and one generation for me is if there's no more than like a 10 or 15-year spread within that organization, I would say I think you're in trouble, because if you want to have more impact beyond just your generation of people, there are no people in this organization who can help you in that regard. Right? Okay. And I think this is particularly important now when we have striated our generation so explicitly that we've given them names, right? You know, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and like that. And people have taken on identity by generation, okay? Which I don't think um, growing up, I'm 69, I don't think growing up that there was so much that. And now there really is a very explicit that. Therefore, if it's now by identity, you can't have a conversation about how we can have younger people in the room unless you have that conversation with younger people. Okay, and it's that that would be a thing.
Well, I think
Thank
we
you.
just heard a lot of really valuable counsel, and I'm going to pretty much let it go at that, except simply to say that I've been blessed with a number of what I call co-mentoring relationships with people half my age. that developed exactly the way Norma said, from first getting to know each other, uh, sometimes under unlikely circumstances, and then finding that we shared a vocation of some sort in the world and supporting each other in it.
Yeah. Thank you. And I want to lift up the intentional work of doing that, of being really intentional about how we're creating spaces and opportunities for those kinds of relationships to be formed and to grow. Nichelle, I wonder if you might join us and say a little bit about a future opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Kathryn. And thank you, Parker and Norma, for such a beautiful and timely conversation. I want to talk about one of our superpowers here at the Center for Courage and Renewal is how we do community. And it's something that we're really proud of. What you all have experienced here today just begins to touch on that. This was just one of those places where the light starts to come in. It starts to filter in, and maybe you started to get some questions as you sat here listening with us, and maybe things are settling in. And we're wondering what has come up. Like, what are you all, from your vantage point, what are the things you want to continue to take away from this conversation? What do you want to be in conversation with others about after you've spent some time here with us? So, as a way of staying in this story, as Norma put it or earlier, we have an opportunity for you to join us on December 11th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You're invited to join us and go a little deeper into conversation with us. What we'll do is we'll do some principles and practices of the Courage and Renewal approach. We will have some guiding framework for you, some additional resources, and it's an opportunity to be in conversation with one another, to be in community after this. I'm sure our registration link will make its way to the chat from here, and it can also be found on our website. I'm available for additional questions about the December 11th event. I'm available for information on Courage and Renewal, a membership with our community. So we really like to thank you for joining us here today and offer you this opportunity to just go a little deeper with us. One of the experiences of being a member of the Courage and Renewal community. We'd love to have you join us for some additional conversation. Thank you, Kathryn.
Yeah, thank you, Nichelle. I want to give in just a moment, Parker and Norma, and actually all of us here, an opportunity just to put some kind of last words in the space. And in just a minute, I'll ask Parker and Norma to do that verbally, and I'll ask the rest of you to do that via the chat. But before we do that and close out our time, I also just want to thank everyone again for being here today. We really want to receive your feedback about today's conversation. And so there will also be a survey link in the chat where you can share your thoughts about this experience. If you're new to the Center for Courage and Renewal and would like to learn more about resources and programs, we invite you to visit our website. There are offerings available for people around the world in lots of different time zones. And we hope that you'll find something there that really resonates with you. You're also going to be receiving an email that will include a recording of today's conversation and additional resources. I think we're also going to be sharing a link to the collective action community of practice that we referenced earlier. And these resources will just help you to continue to reflect on the conversation, engage others in your life who may be interested in going deeper in their own conversations around how to show up with purpose and heart and integrity in this time. Some of you are going to be receiving books because of the way that you registered for the program, and I just want you to know that they will be arriving from Moon Palace, which is an independent bookstore in Minneapolis. And the last thing I'll say again, thank you so much for your contributions to the Center for Courage and Renewal that support our work and our mission. And if you're able, we invite you to consider making an additional contribution to CCR. It's more important than ever to provide the kinds of opportunities that engage people in asking themselves the questions around what is my work to do? What am I called to in this time? To create those spaces where people can find the kind of community and relationships that we have been talking about here. So I'll just extend that invitation to you and gratitude to you again. And Parker and Norma, so much gratitude to both of you for this time today. It went by so quickly. And we are in our last 3 minutes, and so 2 minutes now. And so I would just invite you, is there a word or a couple of words that is really coming up for you here at the end? And you can share that out loud. And for those of you who have also been here in our conversation, if you'd like to put a word or phrase in the chat as you close out our time together.
Could you put a link in the chat for us to make a contribution, a donation?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much. So, Norma, Parker, last words for the moment.
Well, Parker, Kathryn, Michelle, for all of those of you who are on this call, much aloha and many thanks.
And back at you, Norma. It's been wonderful to be with you. Really a special, special opportunity for me and lots of other folks. And I'll just say, as I'm famous for saying this at the Center for Courage and Renewal, my grandfather, whose family was hard hit by the Depression, every time I visited him, his last words when I left were these: write if you get work. And I'll say that to you. Just write if you get good work, and maybe make some good trouble.
Thank you so much. As we say goodbye, I'll invite folks who would like to come off mute and just say a quick goodbye as you turn to whatever your day holds next.
Thank you.
Thank
Blessings.
you.
Lovely.
Thank you. Blessings.
Beautiful. Amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Mahalo nui.
Thank you. So lovely. Thank you so much.
Well, everyone.
Bought the book.
Thank you. It's been great. Bye.
Thanks for
Bye, everybody.
great feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.